It's like a shark, NATO, except with poop.
I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
It makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
Big massive dumps.
Hey everybody, it's Monday. You know what time it is. I think the biggest mistake is giving somebody like myself a soundboard. I have way too much fun with it. More fun than I think I possibly should. But I do. And so, hey, welcome to the show. Hopefully y'all had a pretty good weekend. But we're back. We got stories. We're going to talk about some things. We got Marjorie Taylor Greene saying some pretty unfortunate things over the weekend. We have Liz Cheney. We got Liz Cheney also once again saying terrible things. And now that story is of really big importance to me right now because of the establishment's efforts to make Liz Cheney out to be some sort of a hero because she happens to disagree sort of with Donald Trump, or at least, as far as Donald Trump retaining control of the party, which makes me wonder, Cheney 2024, is that a possible thing? I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. And so I'm going to talk about Liz Cheney. Again, she said some terrible things over the weekend, and I'm going to talk about those to try to kind of push back on this whole let's not rehabilitate the Cheneys. We got Tucker Carlson. I'm sorry, Clucker Carlson. That's a fun story. The appearance of the chicken lover. And then Ron Johnson hates unemployed people. More Republican nastiness, of course, as usual. So yeah, we got stories here. We got fun. We got excitement. We got chickens. We apparently have massive dumps as well.
Dumps. Big massive dumps.
So stick around and please share. Please share the stream. Very helpful getting it out. We're getting crushed by the algorithm. All independent media is. It's not targeting my channel specifically. It's hitting all of us. And so the thing that you can do to help out with that is to share, to like and to share, feed the algorithm, and try to push back against that. We're fighting an uphill battle, what we're doing here versus cable news. And so any little bit from y'all helps. That's all I have to say. All right. In fact, I'm going to do my part by tweeting out the stream at Jeff's Politics. And there's that. All right. Algorithm suppresses progressive media. Really does. And they do that by, of course, elevating so-called authoritative sources, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, which is insane. Like, somehow Fox News is considered by YouTube as an authoritative source. You know why? They get the monies. They got all the monies. So, yeah. We should start calling the algorithm Alden's rhythm, because we don't actually know what it is. It's a complete and utter mystery. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, just look up Alden's number. You'll get it. You'll get it. All right. Anyway, why don't we dive in? Let's start out with Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, making some pretty bad comparisons. Oof. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is under fire from members of even her own party for making an incredibly awful comparison during an interview on a conservative podcast over the weekend. In fact, let's take a look at the first video here.
This woman is mentally ill. You know, we can look back in a time in history where people were told to wear a gold star, and they were definitely treated like second-class citizens, so much so that they were put in trains and taken to gas chambers in Nazi Germany. And this is exactly the type of abuse that Nancy Pelosi is talking about.
I just want to note the irony of Marjorie Taylor Greene using the words, "This woman is mentally ill." Okay. Are you sure you want to go there? I mean, because, that could be considered to be projection. Just a little bit. But on the substance of it, of course, how is this even close to Nazi Germany? I mean, aside from her party, being more or less totally and completely fine with white nationalists and white supremacists, this is the same woman who has been on the record spreading anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. The Jewish space lasers that supposedly started the wildfires in California. So this woman's got some damn nerve making those comparisons. And by the way, I don't know if I really shouldn't even have to say stuff like this, but no, wearing mask mandates to go into grocery stores, and this applies to everybody, they're not the same as having to wear a gold star on your shirt. I mean, here's the thing. We've had over 500,000 Americans that have died as a result of COVID-19. To which for a long time, masks were the only defense that we had. Masks, social distancing, and like half-assed lockdowns. Okay. Now we happen to have vaccines, which is wonderful. Unfortunately, you got a lot of Republicans in the basically the party of QAnon now, which are refusing to take the vaccines, which means we're going to have to wear masks for longer. That's, of course, if you're not vaccinated at all. Although there are people who are fully vaccinated that are not giving up their masks, and there's a reason why. It's because people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So, just a complete and utter insanity. So now, those were saying. I think that was on Friday. It was last week, and so over the weekend, she got a lot of pushback. For one, Jewish groups were quick to condemn her remarks. Here's what the American Jewish Congress said in a tweet: "You can never compare health-related restrictions with yellow star gas chambers and other Nazi atrocities. Such comparisons demean the Holocaust and contaminate American political speech." Well, that's just at least one thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene contaminates. And the other thing would be, of course, the House chambers, which we don't know if she's vaccinated. I think all the Democrats are, but yet we don't know the status of Republicans, and most of them are pretty ancient, and so they would be the ones to need the vaccine. But of course, a few Democrats die from COVID-19 or get sick or whatever. because of the Republicans, as Rand Paul had proven, they're not not going to care at all. They're not going to care at all. So now, one more quote here from the American Jewish Congress. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene must immediately retract and apologize. Now, what do you think the odds are there on that one? Not very good. In fact, after she received criticism, she actually went and doubled down on Sunday.
And so I stand by all of my statements. I said nothing wrong. And I think any rational Jewish person didn't like what happened in Nazi Germany, and any rational Jewish person doesn't like what's happening with overbearing mask mandates and overbearing vaccine policies.
Do you understand, though, why some would be upset and offended by the comment?
Well, do you understand how people feel about being forced to wear masks or being forced to have to take a vaccine or even have to say that whether they've taken it or not? These are just things that shouldn't be happening in America. This is a free country, and it's just ridiculous to have these kind of conversations.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous to have this conversation. Yeah. Imagine turning this around and making yourself into a victim. She said something deeply anti-Semitic and then turns around and says, well, now you know how it feels when you're forced to wear a mask. No. Okay. Let me just say this as a non-Jewish person, okay? One non-Jewish person to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I hope you're listening, Marjorie. Maybe we shouldn't be speaking on behalf of Jewish people. I mean, for one, it should be fairly obvious that you shouldn't speak for a group if you're not part of the group. That said, especially when that particular group keeps getting set up to be a scapegoat for other countries' political problems. Jewish people have been traditionally set up to be the scapegoat for many government's problems around the world. And so there's that. Not only that, but of course, the other issue for speaking for a group that you're not a part of is that no group is a monolith. Jewish people aren't a monolith. Black people aren't a monolith. White people aren't a monolith. And so that's another problem for speaking for other people, and you probably shouldn't do it. Look, the fact is, mask mandates and vaccines are there for safety. Everybody's health and safety. Conservative, liberal, black, white, doesn't matter to the virus. Doesn't discriminate. Doesn't really care who it infects. Now, that said, there's a disproportionate impact on who it tends to impact the most when people get sick. And you have Black and Latino communities that end up getting hit harder, mainly because of density of cities, as well as workplaces like meatpacking plants have been centers of outbreaks because generally they tend to pay people lower wages and refuse to protect their workers. And so those workers are considered essentially to be disposable in our society. The virus doesn't discriminate, but our society and our healthcare system sure does. All right, sure does. All right, more pushback. Representative Liz Cheney chimed in. Here's what she said about Greene's comments. Quote, "This is evil lunacy." I mean, it's hard to disagree with that one. Right on the nose. Representative, this is another Republican, Adam Kinzinger, tweeted this: "Absolute sickness." Again, 100%. Democrats also, by the way, chimed in. But I have one more Republican in a video here. But first, Democratic Representatives Bill Pascrell of New Jersey and David Cicilline of Rhode Island tweeted their criticism as well. As anti-Semitic violence rises, it is disgusting that a Republican member of Congress is comparing mask mandates to the Holocaust. True. Cicilline also called Greene, quote, "a troubled person who was unfit to serve in Congress." True. And then that video that I mentioned, this is Congressman Peter Meyer out of Michigan with an actually pretty strong condemnation.
Any comparisons to the Holocaust, it's beyond reprehensible. This is, I don't even have words to describe how disappointing it is to see this hyperbolic speech that frankly amps up and plays into a lot of the anti-Semitism that we've been seeing in our society today. Vicious attacks on the streets of New York and in Los Angeles that should be, and I do condemn that in the strongest terms. There is no excuse for that. But the broader message that, and to your point of not even wanting to bring it up, I mean, the broadest challenge right now is that that's where the oxygen is. It's in the most outlandish, the most far-fetched, the most attention-seeking message, right? We should be talking about policies. We should be talking about the growing climate solutions. We should be talking about all of the things that will have a tangible impact on this country, on where our cybersecurity capabilities are today, on how we are going to remain competitive and outlast and be the world victors in our global competition against China, right? That's not where our conversation is. It gets distracted by personalities. It gets distracted by everything that is ultimately of very little substance, but has an influence on the body politic.
All right, so I don't agree a lot, I'm assuming, with Peter Meyer. Again, he's a Republican, but there he makes a lot of sense there in much of what he says. Yeah, you should talk about policy. Now, I think that's actually kind of a winner for progressives when Republicans talk about policy, because their policies are mainly tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, more restrictions on abortion. And so, yeah, please go and talk about that. The thing is, they don't talk about that because generally what grabs the oxygen in the room, of course, is people like Marjorie Taylor Greene spewing insane conspiracy theories. They are the party of conspiracy theories, but not only that, because they don't have popular policies. And so, I mean, the Republican Party right now, and I've got an amazing new poll out here, Ipsos Reuters, 61% of Republicans believe the election was stolen from Donald Trump. So they believe in the big lie. They believe that 53% of Republicans believe that Donald Trump is the true president. Like right now. This is the world, this is the reality that Republicans live in right now. It's not objective reality. They don't live in the real world anymore. And so, of course, they're not talking about policy. Of course, they're talking about this insanity. 40% of the base, 40% of the country has basically went insane. They, by and large, voted for people like Greene, voted for people like Donald Trump, Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz. They watch Newsmax and OAN and Fox News and Tucker Carlson. This is who they are. This is who they, by the way, they've been this way for a long, long time. But really, it's just been hidden under that mask. Now the mask is gone. Ripped it right off. They couldn't wait to rip it off and finally show the world just how insane they are. And, well, let me tell you, when somebody shows you who they really are, I think maybe you ought to believe them. All right. She has nothing else to do with their time. She's stripped of committees, so she just goes on TV and talks smack. And raises the most money out of all Republicans, by the way. And so that's something that it really kind of shows you where the party's at. Yeah, she doesn't do anything. She doesn't work. She just talks shit. And then she goes and harasses AOC and other Congress people. Because that's what Republicans want them to do. Republicans don't want policy. They don't want work. They don't want good things to happen. What they want is for someone to own the libs. They want them to own the libs. And again, I'm not saying Peter Meyer. He is one of the few Republicans that are like, no, this is completely crazy. I don't want to be a part of this. But understand, right now, the majority of who's left in the Republican Party, they haven't left already. They're about going to. Because this is what they're all about now. All right. Moving on. Let's go to Liz Cheney. Let's go to the so-called Republicans that are fighting back. All right. Representative Liz Cheney is currently being held up by the establishment press as a stalwart defender of democracy because she disagrees with Donald Trump's big lie about election fraud. She actually accepted reality, objective reality, that Donald Trump did not win the 2020 election. But here's the thing. While she only openly disagrees with his rhetoric, she is endorsing the policy positions on voting and voting restriction pushed by Donald Trump. In fact, she recently talked with Axios's Jonathan Swan about why we need more, or I should say, in her words, less voting. Take a look.
You don't see any linkage between Donald Trump saying the election's stolen and then Republicans in all of these state legislatures rushing to put in place these restrictive voter laws?
Well, I think you have to look at the specifics of each one of those efforts. I think if you look at the Georgia laws, for example, there's been a lot that's been said nationally about the Georgia voter laws that turns out not to be true.
But even the Republican Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, said that when this bill started to pick up momentum was when Rudy Giuliani was testifying that the Georgia election was a sham.
All right, so basically what Swan is coming around to the point of, it's like, no, the reason that these laws are being put forward is because of the big lie. You have Republicans that are like, oh, look at that. Oh, see, voter, we need voter ID. We got undocumented people voting. We got dead people voting. And they all voted for Joe Biden, of course. And that's why Donald Trump lost and actually had really won the election. But they said that he lost because of some weird plot. But don't worry, we're going to put in laws that will make it harder for people to vote. Because something election can, security. Okay. So here's the thing. Donald Trump wanted to rig the election in his favor after the fact. But what the Republican Party is doing, and has been doing for a long time, is to rig the elections ahead of time, beforehand. The result, of course, would be the same. Republicans stay in power for perpetuity. That's good for the Republican Party. This is not complicated. And the problem with voter ID, and I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, come on, voter ID. What's the problem? They can go and get a card, and it's fine. And don't you care about election security? False argument. The problem with voter ID is how difficult, not just difficult, but annoying it is to get. And basically how there are so many different barriers to being able to exercise your vote, to elect your representative. For example, most working people are really not able to get time off to go sit at the Secretary of State to get an ID. I mean, that's a fact for any working person. Well, you're going to, spend an hour, 2 hours sitting at the Secretary of State to go and get a voter ID. I mean, if you're a working class person who's working 2 or 3 jobs to survive, you're going to have time for that. Just saying. Not only that, but the thing about that is that the whole thing about putting barriers isn't a bug. It's a feature. So look at the breakdown of people who can't get or don't get an ID. 18%, almost 6 million citizens over the age of 65 do not have a photo ID. Most likely because, well, they're 65 or older. You generally don't have to drive anymore. You don't have to work anymore, really. And so transportation is difficult to find, often on fixed income, Social Security, things like that. 16% of Latino voters do not have a government-issued photo ID as well. 25% of voting age African Americans, that's huge. 5.5 million people do not have ID. 15% of voting age Americans who earn less than $35,000 a year also do not have a valid ID. These are the groups that Republicans don't want to vote. And most, not all, but many of these groups do happen to vote for Democrats. So it certainly seems like it's a partisan attack on the Democratic voter base in a way that we never see happen towards the Republican base. Think about it this way. Democrats have never attacked voting when it comes to Republicans, when it comes to the Republican base. It's completely unheard of. You never see it happen because it doesn't happen. Whereas the Republican Party consistently tries to restrict the vote, tries to make it so that certain groups have to go through so many different barriers in order just to be able to enter the political discussion. So, and I know a lot of conservatives, by the way, and some even, liberals have said, well, okay, but what's the problem with voter ID if you just make it free? All right, well, free should come with an asterisk, because it turns out there are cities who promise a free ID. However, it turns out not necessarily being free. In fact, it can get very expensive depending on what paperwork is needed in order to get your so-called free ID. In fact, multiple documents are required to get the free ID, just like any other government-issued photo ID. Required documents can include a birth certificate, social security card, citizenship papers, proof of residency, and anybody who's requested these forms before or who hasn't requested these forms before, you don't know how expensive it is. I mean, they charge you for getting your own birth certificate, and it can take quite a long time to have it shipped to your house, to have it mailed to you. And so not only that, but again, a lot of people don't have access to those birth certificates, might not know that they need them before an election, and then will run out of time. Not only that, but think of people who are temporarily homeless, people who've lost their house, people, you could have a fire and all your stuff burnt down. Natural disasters, those who move frequently, or look, you could just lose it. That happens. Not only that, but interestingly enough, and I didn't know this fact, Americans born in Puerto Rico had all of their birth certificates that were issued before 2010 invalidated. So you have to all get a new one. I didn't know that. So now, not having a birth certificate is pretty common, and getting a replacement, again, can be difficult, expensive, or both. Not only that, but getting there's that issue with transportation. If you don't have a photo ID, most likely you don't have a license either, because a license can be considered to be a photo ID. Well, who are less likely? People who don't have cars, people who don't can't really afford their own car, people who live in the inner city, who take public transportation. They don't have a driver's license. Why would you need one? And why would you go and spend money on that? And so getting those can be a challenge, and even getting to the places to get those special IDs that are supposedly free can be expensive. And so not only that, but it's also time sensitive and time intensive. And so let me give you another example here. People in rural areas, you live out in the country, well, it might be pretty difficult for you to get to a Secretary of State, right? It could be miles away. And if you don't have a license, odds are you don't have your own vehicle. And some states, by the way, like Alabama, recently paired their new voter ID laws with the closures of Secretary of State's or DMV offices in predominantly black areas. So we know what this is about. It's very clear. Liberals like to call this a solution in search of a problem. But for once proposing these laws, putting them in place, well, no, they already know the so-called problem. Their problem is black people voting. They don't want people to vote. Paul Weyrich, by the way, the guy that launched all these so-called conservative organizations, the Heritage Foundation, Moral Majority, and all the groups that are pushing this, openly admitted that he doesn't want people to vote. Why? Because if they do, Republicans lose. That's what voter ID in America is ultimately about. It's not like in other nations, by the way, where they do have photo IDs. Because again, I've gotten into arguments with conservatives over this, and they're like, well, such and such country has a voter ID system over in Europe. Okay, but they also don't actively do voter suppression like we do here in America. That said, there's more in this interview with Swan. In fact, she's gonna go on to struggle to come up with defenses against Swan's questioning. Take a look.
I don't think anyone doubts that the reason 400 some voting bills have been introduced, 90% by Republicans, supported by the Republican National Committee. I don't think it's a coincidence after the election that this has happened.
Look, I think everybody should want a situation and a system where people who ought to be able to vote and have the right to vote can vote, and people who, don't shouldn't. And again, I come back to things like
But what problem
voter
are
ID.
they solving for? Like, there's
Well,
not like, what
look,
are all these states doing?
No, I think, each state is different.
What was the big problem in Georgia that needed to be solved by a new law? What was the big problem in Texas? What was the big problem in Florida? These laws are coming all around the states, and what are they solving for?
I think you've got to look at each individual state law. But I think what we can all agree on...
You can't divorce them from the context.
Well,
come on.
yeah, but I think what we can agree on is that what is happening right now is really dangerous. And
I can agree with that.
When I think about 2000, think about sitting on the inaugural platform in January of 2001, watching Al Gore. Of course, we had won. I'm sure he didn't think he had lost. Mm-hmm. We had fought this politically very, very intense battle, and he conceded. He did the right thing for this nation. And that is one of the big differences between that and what we're dealing with now, and the danger of Donald Trump today.
Yeah, I'm probably going to blow your mind, but I'm pretty sure there was that whole, hanging chads effery that happened. Jeb Bush in Florida. I think Al Gore, if he had pushed it, actually did win. He did get the popular vote, and he didn't push hard enough. There is a difference, and I know Donald Trump. No. Al Gore didn't ask for a recount at all. He gave up, and it was his right in this case to be able to call for a recount. But anyway, the thing about that. The thing about what she's saying is basically she dodged the question. This is a masterclass example of being able to dodge and weave without giving an answer to a question because she has no answer. These laws are not solving any problem. They're there to make sure black voters are disenfranchised and that Republicans continue to win. That's it. Some examples, again, for these laws. Restrictions on voting by mail. Who votes by mail? Well, a lot of people, actually. But during the pandemic, during the 2020 election, after Donald Trump had spent months and months saying, don't vote by mail, you shouldn't vote by mail, it's full of voter fraud. Well, then suddenly people changed their minds. Less Republicans voted by mail, and Democrats, the same number, actually probably more Democrats voted by mail because of the pandemic. And so this is a good example of something that used to be not controversial, that got super controversial for no goddamn reason, is vote by mail. Look, very, very, very few instances of mail-in ballot fraud, voting by mail, or absentee ballot fraud. It's just not a thing that's happened. Again, voting by mail in Oregon has been done for over a decade with very, very infinitesimally small amounts of actual fraud. And so this is, again, supposedly a solution in search of a problem. But again, they already know the problem. For them, it's black people voting. Now, there's more. Let's see. Another restriction that I've talked about before. You can't give water to people standing in line. Well, who ends up having to wait in line to vote? Black voters. Who has to bear the brunt of all the numerous roadblocks put in the way of voting? Black people. Yeah. Not only that, but from closing down of polling places to programs like Chris Kobach's interstate cross-check, voter purges, making certain types of protests illegal, and then, of course, making sure that felons do not have a right to vote. We see that it's pretty goddamn clear what is going on here. And the thing is, they're too stupid. They think we're too stupid to realize what's actually going on. Yeah. And so the thing is, and what completely invalidates Liz Cheney and makes her look like a complete raging hypocrite, is that all of this stuff is based on, what is it? These voter ID laws are are based on voter fraud, right? The big lie is also based on voter fraud. You say you don't believe it, Liz, but you're out here defending the very policies created that give credence to the big lie itself. And why is she doing that? Because at the end of the day, she's one of them. She's a ghoul. Most of the Republicans in office only want one thing, and that's power. Hell, honestly, most politicians do. That's why a lot of people get into politics. Power. But Republicans can no longer count on winning the majority anymore. That's why they cheat. Their ideas are unpopular. They're out of step with the American people and favor a tiny group of elite billionaires and large corporations, while pretending, of course, that, oh, no, we're for the little guy. No, we're for the little guy. We're for working people, except that all of our policies hurt working people and favor corporations. And so, again, what they do is they cheat, they gerrymander, they suppress their way into office, and then use those same tools to make sure they stay in office. Donald Trump only tried to do that after the fact, and in so doing, ripped the mask off what the party has been doing for a very, very long time prior to the vote. And all Liz Cheney wants to do is politely put the mask back on and continue on as if nothing happened. And who knows, maybe challenge Trump if he's going to run in 2024. Do not be fooled by the Liz Cheneys of the world. We know what they're about. Okay. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We got the chicken lover segment. I think you're going to enjoy this. Super chats, all that stuff on Twitch as well. Subbies and stuff. If there are any, right after this break. Stay right here around the nation.
There's insanity in the control room.
Dumps. Big, massive dumps.
Tighten up my meat. I like my meat tight.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Around the nation. Waldorf Nation. All right. So, y'all are already loving the chicken story. I'm going to get to it. We'll get to it. All right. So before I do, I just want to remind everybody we're on streaming on Twitch and Facebook. Show us some love there. Really help us out. Let's see as well. Let's go over here to YouTube. Why does that never work? Gabby Mathis, thank you for the kind $5. The kind $5 donation. You know, the show survives off that stuff, right? I mean, we're trying to build something sustainable here. And so, you know, if you could help us out, become a patron, patreon.com/Waldorf. And, you know, super chats, subbies, all that stuff on Twitch. Great way to help us, you know, continue to be sustainable. Anyway. Let's go to the chicken story. Wait, hold on. There was a comment here that I saw. Let's see. No, it's not bamboo chicken. Barbecue boat. I lost it. Yeah, I lost that comment. That's okay. Pictures on the wall look good. Thank you. Thank you. All like custom stuff. So this one over here, the letter hack. Great people. Great picture. And the dragon is Mini Morpho. So go check her out, by the way, on her Twitch channel, Mini Morpho. Wonderful artist. Great artistry. And so, and by the way, she streams drawing on Twitch. So we've done a couple of Mini Morpho raids. But thank you. Sprucing up the old bit. And by the way, like y'all like the red, so I decided to go with that today. So good stuff. All right. Anyway, let's dive in. I did check into the graphic. It's really nice. It is really nice. I'm gonna find a way to work it into it. It's just I haven't really gotten into it. Haven't had a chance. I'm very busy with home projects. That's also why I haven't been streaming as well. So you know. Here we go. All right. Fox News host Tucker Carlson has a message for the CDC. Leave our chickens alone.
CDC is warning Americans about chickens, and we're quoting now. Don't kiss or snuggle backyard poultry and don't eat or drink around them, end quote. Now that raises the question, who are these chicken touchers out there that the CDC is concerned about? And we're not judging as we ask that, we just would like to know. Are there people in this country who snuggle chickens? There are. And again, not judging, we found one. Here she is. Tara, thanks so much for coming on. That's a good-looking bird. Me. So how do you... It feels like you've been singled out by the CDC for criticism. How does that feel?
You know, I'm not a huge fan of it because I've been handling chickens since I was about 4 years old, and I've been kissing them, snuggling them, shoving my face in them, and I'm fine. People around me are fine, and I don't see a problem with it.
I mean, you're living the way people used to live. I mean, human beings have a long history with poultry. It's a domesticated animal, right? Why do you think there's the concern now? Why are they coming after you now, the CDC?
I think that maybe they're just looking for something else to control, and I'm not a huge fan, and I don't support it. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to keep loving on my birds and showing them my affection.
Chicken toucher. Yeah. Chicken toucher. Chicken Tucker, even. Oof. What was this? How is this segment even real? What is reality right now? I don't understand what the hell I just watched. This is all right. This is both. It's incredibly silly, kind of hilarious, but there's a little bit of an insidious component to it as well. All right, but first, chickens. Chicken. This reminds me of a South Park episode where they're looking for the chicken lover, or well, in this case, chicken enthusiast. Okay, but really, look, I know people who have chickens. I know people who raise chickens. There's nothing wrong with raising chickens. Eggs, meat, whatever, or they just want to raise, chickens for whatever reasons, sustainability. Okay, I don't care. Oh, totally fine, totally fine. Do some people want to treat their chickens as pet? Oh, obviously. But there's a history of people treating non-pets as pets. And you say, oh, how dare you? Your chickens are your baby. Chickens are my babies. Chickens are my pet. Yeah, but they're not an inside pet. They're an outside pet. All right? Or whatever. They're an outside animal. What the CDC is doing is saying, hey, don't make out with your chickens. That's it. And of course, common sense stuff, as in, you should wash your hands for 20 seconds after contact with the birds or related supplies, and should not allow children under 5 to touch the birds because of salmonella. Basically, hey, if you lick your chicken, you could get salmonella. And what's more, well, I mean, if you lick raw chicken or uncooked chicken, which would be a live chicken, just saying. And so, yeah, there is that possibility of salmonella. In fact, one expert says if you're going to snuggle them close to your face or mouth, you probably ought to wash your face and brush your teeth just to prevent any cross-contamination from those birds. And then goes on to add, chickens aren't dirty animals by any means, but they naturally have a lot of bacteria around their bodies. All right, hey, look, that's fair. Makes sense. Seems rather self-explanatory. Pretty simple. Okay, don't kiss your birds. And if you do, well, then wash your hands and, wash yourself off to make sure that you don't get sick. Now, as with a lot of guidelines, it's really common sense. And again, it is a guideline. Doesn't mean you have to do it. You're not going to have the government coming to your house and ripping the chicken from your arms. Okay, that's not going to happen. So if you want to snuggle with them, go ahead. Don't be surprised if possibly you get sick. You might get sick, you might not. Hey, different strokes for different folks, I guess, right? And here's the rub, and I don't mean to dry Montreal, okay? This is Tucker Carlson's, and to get a little serious now, this is Tucker Carlson's way, I think, of undermining and attacking the CDC without openly doing it. Oh, most people will look at that and be like, ha, chicken lover. Yeah, chicken lover. Yeah, okay, that's funny, move on. But really, when you look at it, the undertones, I mean, kind of suggest like, look at how ridiculous CDC recommendations are. They're stupid and bad, and you should ignore them, especially when it comes to masks or vaccines. I mean, he had been openly attacking masks and vaccines anyway. But now, apparently, he's found a way to do it without getting people, alarmed even more than they already are. So, I don't know. That's just what I see. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me, it doesn't seem like it's a coincidence that he took this opportunity to bring on a so-called chicken enthusiast, which, look, the whole, by the way, the whole control thing, she's like, I think it's just a way for the CDC to control somebody. I was going to say before that, all right, hey, do you, chicken person, chicken enthusiast, whatever, God bless, right? Then after that, I was like, she kind of crazy. Not good. Not good at all. But yeah. Using this, I think, is a vehicle to attack the CDC, and especially over something as not controversial as them saying, please don't kiss your chickens. Just because, come on. We know what Tucker Carlson's about. We know he's not dumb. In fact, his biggest downfall, I think, is how much smarter he thinks he is compared to the rest of us. When in fact, of course, a lot of us, most of us, see right through him in his little act. So, I think she was paid to do it. I don't know. I have no idea. All right, let's go to Ron Johnson. What's this about chickens? You're a little late. You're a little late. You missed that one. All right. Senator Ron Johnson is not a fan of paying workers a living wage. He's also not a fan of the unemployment benefits. And he's going to go on a local news station to basically talk about why he's supporting a bill in Wisconsin that would end the $300 a week federal unemployment subsidy. He's going to claim, of course, like a lot of Republicans, that, oh, no, this is stopping people from going back to work. When in reality, of course, it's a myriad of different factors that are stopping people from going back to work, not really related to the $300, the extra unemployment benefits, but has actually more to do with lack of, over 500,000 people died, for example, of COVID-19. People in the food industry were hurt especially hard in the restaurant industry, as well as the meatpacking industry and places like that. Low wage work, and the fact that it is low wage to begin with is also a disincentive when you have an economy that's beginning to open up, and higher level jobs, higher paying jobs, I should say, have opened up as well. A lot of people have moved on from the restaurant industry, but none of that matters to Ron Johnson because that involves facts. In fact, here's what he said during that interview. People are literally making more money on unemployment with the plus up federal benefits than they made at their job. Businesses, and this is where he kind of gives up the ghost, right? This is where he's like, this is what's happening. Businesses cannot compete with the equivalent of $16.75 in wages provided by the government. Yeah. So now for normal people, it's like, well, okay, well, maybe you should, your jobs should pay more than the government, and that will get people back to work. But no, for him, he's like, businesses can't compete with the government, even though there's temporary benefits. So then let's get rid of the benefits faster. Of course. In fact, he said, wages are set in the marketplace and businesses pay what wages they can afford based on the competitive situation. No, that's actually wrong. I mean, look, that's how it's supposed to work in libertarian fantasy land, but we don't live in that. In the real world, the marketplace and wages are actually influenced by a lot of different factors. Very, very numerous in detail. But really, the main one that we're looking at is we don't actually live in a free market based on any of those rules. So it's not going to follow rules if those rules don't actually work in the real world. You see what I mean? We have a situation right now where corporations, these companies, are sitting on trillions of dollars in assets. 9 new billionaires as a result of COVID-19, just the vaccines. Big pharma companies. There were 9 new billionaires created this year alone. Jeff Bezos is on track to becoming the world's first trillionaire. And interestingly enough, these companies who, these restaurants that claimed that their backs would be broken by higher wages, now faced with a worker shortage, are like, no, raise the wages just a little bit. I mean, first they're trying everything they can before raising the wages. Like, we'll give you a free iPhone, or hey, come in for an interview, you get like an extra $100. We'll just give you $100 on the spot. Hey, wouldn't you kids like that? No, we'd like to get paid a living wage, thanks. Like, we don't want your crumbs. We want the dignity of work with a fair living wage that you can actually live off of. It's not that complicated. But here's the thing. a lot of these companies, in response to this, have had to go, oh, okay, we'll raise our wages. Fine, we'll do it. Which means that they were lying about it not being able to raise the wage the whole time. Weird, I know, right? Weird. And Ron Johnson is not going to argue for higher pay for workers. He's going to argue against that. He wants less. In fact, he says that workers should accept less money, less pay, because they should be worried about inflation. Quote, increases in wage rates ratchet up and that creates permanent inflation. So you may feel good about getting a 5, 6, or 7% raise, but if general inflation is 6, 7, or 8%, that increase is just completely wiped out. By the way, for people going from the federal minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, to a $15 minimum wage, that's not 6, 7, 8%. That's like 50%. Almost. That's doubling your earnings. And I know, like, the right wingers, it's crazy. Oh my God, doubling their earnings. What are you doing? You realize it's only $30,000 a year, right? That ain't shit. Because it turns out that inflation happened anyway. Inflation has already happened. It's just the people who are working in these industries, their wages were kept stagnant for so long that the cost of everything shot up way faster, way more than they could keep up with. And so, yeah. All right. Oh, is that almost? I got my math wrong, didn't I? It's all right. It is a huge increase. It is a doubling of the wage. This is what I was trying to say. All right. So with that said, you ever wonder, by the way, why they only talk about inflation when it comes to the workers, but not the inflation when a CEO, for example, gives himself a $6 million pay raise? They don't talk about that at all, right? And they never worried about it when prices kept rising, as I mentioned before, when wages stayed stagnant for years. Obviously, they seem to only be worried when the wealthy and corporations tend to have an increase in labor prices. And of course, you know, Ron Johnson is only concerned about that because that means he gets less in donations. But in case you are worried, by the way, about inflation, there are ways to avoid that. First of all, if you raise the minimum wage and index it to the national, if you index the national minimum wage to inflation, then you can kind of avoid that problem because as inflation goes up, so will wages. So it won't like even out. It'll work out. So it's not something that you can fix, but even so, you really don't even have to worry about that. But again, Ron Johnson and the Republican Party don't want to fix the issue. They want to keep wages artificially low, which of course has consequences, it turns out, because workers, when it gets to a certain point, workers will refuse those jobs. And that's what's happening right now. Make no mistake, this is what a general strike could look like. And even though it hasn't been organized, it turns out that we're kind of experiencing a little slice of what it would be like if there were a general strike. And you've seen the results already. Imagine everybody who was not making enough money stopped working until they were guaranteed a living wage. Everybody who wasn't making, $25 an hour. Imagine if all right, I'm not making that much money. I'm not making $25 an hour, which is what wages would be if they had kept up with productivity and inflation. I guess we'll strike. General strike. Their hair would be on fire and things would change very quickly because, again, it turns out that most of the companies that are not paying a living wage right now could have done so immediately. They could have, they can afford it. And I know some of you might be like, what about the mom and pop shops? Well, it turns out a lot of those small companies, which don't really exist as much anymore because the Walmarts of the world driving them out of business already, and the large corporations, places like Amazon, also driving them out of business. The ones that are left are actually doing a higher minimum wage. They are offering a living wage. For example, there was Dan Price, the CEO in Seattle, who, by the way, gave up a good portion of his salary and raised everybody's pay to $70,000 a year. He's not a millionaire anymore, but his workers have never been happier or more productive. He could do it. He just had to give up himself. And so, again, these companies could afford it. And another example here, there's an Atlanta-based ice cream shop who offered, who had a bunch of open positions. And they decided, well, we can't get anybody we can't find anybody to work it here. Why don't we raise our wage? Why don't we do an offer, a starting wage of $15 an hour? And what happened to Jacob Hancher is that job applications skyrocketed practically overnight. He said after raising wages, he received well over 1,000 applications for 16 open staff positions. People want to work, but they actually want to get paid well for working. And so that's the other thing. The whole idea of, oh, people just want to be lazy. No, they want to get paid for working. They want to get paid fairly for working. And not only that, again, he's noticed in his employees, the new ones that he's hired on and the ones that he's had working, now for that new wage, they're happier. Customer service is better. They're more stable. In fact, here's what he told the Journal-Constitution. Quote, especially in the restaurant business, turnover is a big issue. The other issue is burnout. A lot of people work 2 or 3 jobs, and now they're just working one job. So people are showing up on time now. They're reporting to work in a better mood. Customer service is improved, things like that, but you don't always account for. True. Who knew that happy workers would be more productive and give better customer service? Oh, wait, everybody with a working brain. Yeah. And so my point is that you have these rich people that have this, and conservatives that have this reverence for the almighty stock markets. They're the ones that are driving the misery in this country. For decades, workers, regular working people, have gotten short end of the stick, told that they needed to suck it up and be happy that they have a job. I remember that. I remember going through the recession. Oh, you used to be like, happy that you have a job. You're lucky. A lot of people don't have a job. So you just take that, $9 an hour and you suck it up. Just be glad. Well, I don't think you should be happy at a job where you're mistreated, overworked, and underpaid. That's just me. But what's interesting about this change, and it happened so suddenly, is that now it seems like workers are starting to realize they're worth more than they were told. Again, throughout the entire pandemic, and it really is a game changer. They were told, you're the essential workers. You're essential. You're essential. We need you. We need you so bad. Oh my God. You're making the economy continue during this difficult time where everybody else is shut down. We need you. And yet they refused. You refused to pay these people. There's a couple of places that did a nice, heroes bonus or something like that. And I forget what it is. And then they just kind of forgot about it. And then these same people who ended up working in these places and losing that bonus, guess what? They had to deal with the anti-maskers, getting treated very poorly, getting tipped very poorly by, again, this, same anti-maskers who have always shit on people who are, waiting tables and doing those kinds of jobs. They said just, months ago or weeks prior that they were so essential. And finally, these people, they got sick of it. They got sick of not being respected. And let me tell you, people who work in fast food, people, working, as busboys, cooks, direct care professionals, people who take care of people in nursing homes, some of the hardest working, least respected people out there. And I think that's wrong. We need them. They are essential. They are vital. And it's about time we treated them that way. And not the way that Ron Johnson and the rest of these rich assholes want to treat them, which is to say how he views them as lazy, worthless, unimportant trash. Well, to him, I say, I think we know who the real trash is. And maybe in your next election, your voters ought to take you out to the curb where you belong. All right. All right. was in a family argument, went to work. An hour later, got told to leave my problems at home, plaster in a fake smile, and get back to work. Had a miscarriage. Oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh my God, there's so many stories of people working in those industries that get treated like garbage. I try to treat people well. I never worked in fast food, but I did work in grocery. I wasn't a cashier. I worked in the back. But I've heard stories. I've heard stories and I've seen it happen before. Those jobs are pretty terrible. And by the way, when I wasn't working in the back in retail, I was doing stocking. And of course I had been working in factories as well. So, I still know that a lot of people who work in those retail jobs as a cashier get treated like garbage. Waitressing job at a bar for $2.95 an hour. Ugh. Awful. All right. That's all I got for you today. Jeez, that was an hour already. All right, so I got to get going. I got to go and get some stuff edited, get the show edited today. Please like and share this stream if you haven't already. Very helpful if you do. Let's see. Thank you all for all the followings, all the follows on Twitch. Thank you. I appreciate that. The super chats as well. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. And all the shares and likes. Make sure to do that before you leave as well. And we're going to be raiding on Twitch. Who are you going to raid today? Let's see. I think today we'll do a Surfs raid. We haven't raided them in a little bit, so we'll do that. To everyone else, go and check out the Surfs TV on Twitch. Even those of you on my YouTube channel, check them out. Lance is very based, so I think you'll enjoy it. All right, everybody, love you, and remember, change begins with you. We'll see you tomorrow. You have a good night.
Dumps. Big, massive dumps.
Give me a break.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
There's some horns in this house.
Please clap.
There's insanity in the control room.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.